Welcome back. In our last video we talked about carving away clay for our Ocarina Fantasy Creature and adding extra clay on, or sculpting the clay for our fantasy creature. You can see in this example here I added on the little spines for the back. I added on the eyes, I added on an extra horn up here, I added on some teeth. I carved away clay for the body to make the shape nice. I carved away some clay on the top of his spines on his head up there to make it look nice. So once you've got all the kind of final sculpting, final carving and all that done, then you're going to start putting in impressed textures and incised lines for your design. So an impressed texture is whenever you take a tool, let's say a popsicle stick, and you push it into the surface to make a design. So you can see there that I've made a little design by pushing this into the surface, and if I repeat it over and over, I can make myself a pattern. So let's say impressed texture, and right underneath that I'll put pattern. Because some of you might want to create a pattern for like feathers or for scales or whatever else. You might want to have some repeated natural like pattern. Okay. Likewise, you're going to incise some lines. A lot of you will find that using a toothpick is a really great tool for this, because what you can do is you can actually use a toothpick like a drawing tool or like a stylus, and you can draw some straight lines, curved lines, or whatever, and that can enhance your impressed texture or pattern. So to get started, those are the kind of two things I want you to focus on for today. And I'm going to take my my pointed popsicle stick here, and I'm going to start pushing it into the surface. And maybe if I zoom in a little bit like that, you can see a little bit better if I angle it that way. And if I take this and I start pushing it into the surface, you'll see that it's going to start to make a little like scale, pointed scale pattern. And if I do that over and over, I'll kind of get a texture of like dragon scales or something. So I'm going to kind of just start pushing it into the surface and making that texture, and trying to make them small and large and overlap to create the kind of pattern and texture that I want. So this being a scale pattern, you know, depending on what you've got, if you've got fur or you know, feathers, there's a better look at it. You can kind of see how those pieces overlap to create that little scale pattern. I'm gonna do it again here on my feet, or not my feet, what is this, his leg, his back thigh, I guess, and I'm just going to start pushing it in. You want to make this kind of either regular or irregular depending on what your creature looks like. Like I was saying, perhaps it's a unicorn and it's got like a furry texture. Then you might want to think of using maybe the edge of a popsicle stick, or maybe a paintbrush. Think about your different tools. Maybe take a little scrap of clay and do some little practice impressions first to see if the texture is exactly what you'd like it to be, so that when you start actually, you know, pushing it into the surface of your animal, it's actually going to give you the texture that you want for their skin texture or their hair texture. Okay, and I'm going to have to kind of wiggle this guy around here. So as you do this, you won't have to be tilting yours around to get it underneath the camera, which is going to be a huge benefit for you. But if as you're doing this you need to, I'm actually just going to break my popsicle stick here. Popsicle sticks are cheap, so I'm going to break my popsicle stick and do this so I can actually get it underneath my head here. Be careful not to you know, bump your pitch holes or your mouthpiece, so that as you get done with your impressed textures and designs, you still have an ocarina that works. I've got a lot of disaster going on here with my neck and trying to hold it under the camera, that I've got quite a lot on my plate. But for you guys, hopefully you'll be able to just to lay yours down on the table gently and create your textures that way rather than having to pick it up. I would suggest the less you move your ocarina, the better, because the more you move it, the more it's going to have a tendency to break or crack or get bent the wrong way, and then you're going to have to spend more time fixing the things that were broken from you messing around with it. So try your best to keep it, you know, even, textured, and not breaking. If you need some suggestions or ideas, you can obviously ask me during class, during work time, and we can kind of work on that together. And right now I'm actually kind of pushing around this hole, and I can see that it's actually changing the hole quite a bit. So my ocarina is going to probably get out of tune, which is alright. I'll just tune it up a little bit later and make sure that it's back in tune before I let it dry. Make sure that your ocarina is in tune before you let it dry, because if your ocarina gets out of tune and then you let it dry, it will always be out of tune. Okay, so please be sure that you're careful with the tuning of your ocarina and how that is all working together. Okay, there's the texture on my neck on that side. We'll finish the texture on the neck for this side. And then I might just call it quits with my impressed texture, at least on camera. I might do a little more working off camera to get things perfected. Okay, so there's my impressed texture for the design of the dragon's back and body. Now for the incised lines, you could choose to do kind of a bunch of different things. You might want to take this and enhance the impressed texture you already did. You might want to do something different. I think for my incised line, I might choose to go and work on this face. I think I'll take some lines and kind of enhance this horn, the look of that horn. I might take this and draw some little like eyebrow lines on there, and maybe some other little lines, almost like scar lines or like texture lines around his mouth. I think I also want to kind of outline the triangle shape on his little spines on his back. Okay, and think of the incised line as a way for you to emphasize or make something look better. Don't just put random slices on for no reason. Think about why you're doing it, how it's going to enhance the pattern or the design, how it's going to make your artwork look better. Not just, well, Mr. Lundgren says I have to put something on here, so I'm going to do it somewhere. I don't know what, but or if it's going to make it look better, but I have to do it. Okay, think about why you're doing it, where you're doing it, if it's really going to make your artwork look better before you do it. I mean, you've put so much work in at this point between the making of the ocarina, the designing of the fantasy creature. Don't ruin it by being sloppy right at the last minute and, you know, doing some lousy designs with your line textures. Okay, so think about where you're going to do that. Also, think about your painting. How are you going to paint your ocarina's designs so that they look cool? You want those ocarina designs to like really stand out, and you want to maybe use these lines. Think of using black, like black lines like tattoos or something to enhance the design. Make sure that you're thinking of symmetry. Make sure you're thinking of direction. how all of those pieces play into your ocarina's design and texture. Of course, I forgot my little texture lines over here on his foot, or rather his leg. So I gotta finish that off. Okay, so there you go. There's my finished ocarina. I've got my impressed textures and created that scale-like pattern. I incised lines in for my design on the little spines and on his face. Of course, everyone's going to have a different answer depending on what your ocarina looks like and what things need to be made on it to make it look nice. Okay, so really think about what part of your ocarina needs the impressed texture and what part needs the incised line, and make it specific so that your ocarina looks the best it can possibly look. And if you have questions, ask me during class and we'll work on that together. So that's how you finish your ocarina's impressed textures and incised lines.